morning, good afternoon, good evening. Africa is considered the dark continent because, unfortunately, the continent has been plagued by cases of corruption, mismanagement, civil wars, and criminal waste of the various countries' human and material resources. It is interesting that some of the leaders have now taken the view that a united Africa, United States of Africa, is the solution. Beggars belief. Here are leaders who have failed to run the individual country, and yet they think they can run the whole region, SADC, and better still, run the whole continent. How do you expect a buffoon like Mnangagwa to run SADC when he has failed to govern Zimbabwe? The very thought of it is ridiculous. And yet, we've been bombarded by this call for United States of Africa. Here is a latest call from none other than Julius Malema of South Africa.
Leader of the Economic Freedom Fighters, Julius Malema, has again called for the collapsing of borders in Africa. Malema was speaking at the party's 6th birthday anniversary celebrations in Mpumalanga this afternoon.
Comrades, this continent of Africa must be one. I hear you saying, he says, the borders must be open. The borders must be opened. Because borders are opened for white people. When there is a white person from Mozambique who can't even speak English, you welcome them. When there is a brother from Mozambique into Nelspruit, you call them names. Yet you don't call white people names. There is no Mozambique here. There is no Swaziland here. There is no Lesotho here. There is no Botswana here. Zambia or Namibia, there is no Zimbabwe, there is Africa, the continent of our ancestors. We were divided by the colonizers. What type of a student activist are you? What type of a ground force are you? You say, I don't want colonialism, we want decolonization, yet you are supporting colonial borders in Africa. We don't want anything that looks like colonialism. We want to be one thing with our sisters in Tanzania, in Nigeria, in Egypt, in DRC, in Sudan, in South Sudan, everywhere else in Africa. We don't want passport, we don't want visa, we must move free of charge.
That is very well said. But let's face it, many African countries, since independence, have seen their economic fortune and political stability deteriorate. Zimbabwe is probably the worst case, one of the worst case examples of that, where basic services have all but collapsed. We have got millions of our people still living in abject poverty. And it is because of bad governance, because of corruption. Those are the immediate problems that our leaders should concern themselves. Why is it that post-independent Africa, in some cases, is economically and politically worse off than during the colonial days? Those are the problems we should be addressing. If we can manage those problems and build the economy, make it prosperous, take our people from the grass-thatched mud huts and give them decent accommodation with basic services, clean running water, sewage system, good education. Those are the immediate problems. Then we can talk about African unity later on. If we fail to address those basic needs, and yet we want to rule the whole region, in the case of Mnangagwa, when he was made chairperson of the SADC region, you could tell that he was itching to be the king of the whole SADC region. Here is a man who has completely destroyed Zimbabwe. He wants to be the king of the whole SADC region. The whole concept is totally meaningless. Yes, the colonial powers divided Africa and created the borders. Why are we quarreling about the borders when we have got a more urgent task before us? Pulling our African continent out of the dark ages, the stone ages, into the 21st century. We've got a lot to catch up. Yes, during colonial rule, the colonial masters exploited the people and Africa's resources, holding the continent and its people back. Now that all the African countries have attained their independence, why are we not focusing on catching up, giving our people a life fit for the 21st century out of the Stone Ages? We now seem to be concerned about we must be united, the United States of Africa. If you can't govern a single country, it makes you think you can govern a region, much less a continent. Many Zimbabweans will remember Julius Malema for his praise of the late dictator Robert Gabriel Mugabe. Mostly his racist rhetoric and racist policies. The truth of the matter is, Mugabe was using those rhetorical racist remarks and policies to cover for the corrupt and tyrannical oppression of the black majority. There is no denying that ZANU-PF has kept the majority of the blacks in abject poverty for selfish political gain. I've often played this video clip of Margaret Longo, an independent MP at one point, a former ZANU-PF MP, and a freedom fighter in her own right, explaining how ZANU-PF is keeping rural Zimbabweans poor for their own political gain.
They have wrong priorities, especially the current government. How can you go and build an airport which services a few people, and the majority are the elite and the so-called investors? Look at the rural. I made you come to interview me because I wanted you to have the experience of the roads that we are using. If we go today to our hospital there, you feel pity with that's a hospital in a rural area. If we go to our clinic, you feel pity. We have no piped water here. Do you know the reason why the rural people vote for ZANU-PF? One, they're intimidated. Two, the policy is that the rural people should remain poor and subservient to the government. They should remain poor, because if they remain poor, they continue singing the song for their master. This is why these people have been impoverished. It's for a reason. Because at the moment, if you economically empower these people, they'll go out of hand. ZANU-PF will never have control over them.
So, many Zimbabweans have left the country to escape the economic poverty and political oppression from ZANU-PF. And they found their way into South Africa. That is a serious problem. We can talk about South Africa must have open borders. Yes, I think South Africa is one of the few countries that has had open borders since 1994. But the truth of the matter is, there is growing unease between the South Africans and the foreign Africans. Hence, the xenophobia attacks. South Africa has not been spared the same curse that has befallen many other African countries, i.e., post-independent economic decline. And it is the economic decline that has fueled the xenophobia, attacks against fellow Africans. As the economy gets worse, the local people will look for scapegoats to blame for their economic difficulties. And South Africa has got to sort out its economic problems. Or the xenophobia problem will get worse. That is the truth. It is disappointing, of course, to note that Mnangagwa has managed to con most African leaders to support his notion that Zimbabwe's economic meltdown has been caused by the sanctions imposed by the West. And many of those African leaders have rallied around Mnangagwa. The truth of the matter is, the so-called Western imposed sanctions are not the root cause of Zimbabwe's economic meltdown. It is corruption. Zimbabwe, when it was Rhodesia, was under even more stringent UN sanctions. And yet, the country emerged in 1980 with a very strong economic infrastructure, working hospitals and an education system, and was, if we had maintained and built on what we inherited, was set to become the South Korea of Africa. The country has collapsed instead and become one of the poorest countries in the world because of decades of gross mismanagement and rampant corruption. Nothing to do, or very little to do, with the so-called Western imposed sanctions. And why all these other African leaders should rally to support a falsehood when they know that it is not sanctions that is the root cause of of Zimbabwe's problems. Beggars belief. So I come back to this issue. Many African leaders want to look at the United States of Africa as the way forward for the continent. We should focus on each individual country becoming economically successful and politically stable before we can look at the bigger project of uniting Africa. The European Union has worked, but even then they are having some problems working as a union. But nonetheless, they have worked so far because those individual countries in Europe have been economically stable and politically stable for generations. And when you join the European Union, they set the rules that you must have these values as the common values that will unite. And this is one of the reasons why some of the new members who have joined the European Union, particularly from the East, have struggled to work within the Union. Africa, we are far from reaching that point. Many countries in Africa are politically and economically unstable. And to keep arguing that we should unite the whole continent when we have failed to produce stability, economic stability and prosperity in the individual countries is nonsense. Let's focus on what we can do and what we should be doing. If you can pull the individual countries out of the dark ages into the 21st century, then you have passed the acid test of we are politically stable and economically prosperous. Then we can talk of greater unity. Indeed, that greater unity will be a formality that will not even need to be campaigned for, because you'll be trading freely. We need to focus on what we can do and what we must do, instead of wasting our time and breath talking of the bigger picture when we cannot sort out the individual country. Hankering for a United States of Africa when we have failed to govern the single country is a nonsense. Thank you. Have a good day.